Glad you're here today. You know, a few years ago now, 2 or 3 years, I suppose, I was flying out of San Antonio, Texas, coming home. And a lady came sit down beside me. She said, "I'm so nervous, I don't know what to do." She said, "I don't fly very much." And I said, "Well, it'll be all right." And we talked for a minute, and she said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a pastor." She said, "Oh, my husband's a pastor." I said, "Yeah, what kind?" She said, "Assembly of God." I said, "I'm Assembly of God pastor." She said, "Oh, now I feel comfortable." So we flew a ways and we talked. She said, "I'm flying down to see my daughter. She and her husband are stationed at an army base in Savannah." I said, "That's where I pastor, down near there." She said, "We're going to have to come visit your church." I said, "Great." And so Sunday went by. I didn't see her. I said, "She's just like every other preacher's wife. She's lying." No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that for real. So I said, well, they didn't come. Then the next Sunday, I think they came. And I tell you what's the truth. Their daughter and son-in-law and now new baby has been with us all that time. And we've grown to love them with all of our heart. They've been sort of like mine and Teresa's children. We just treat them like they belong to us. Well, they're leaving. Our hearts are broken. The good thing is they're moving back to San Antonio, and I bet her dad and mom are just excited, and Jose are just excited as they can be to have that new grandbaby home. So Morgan's in here by herself. I think Jose must have the baby out. Stand up, Morgan, so they can see who you are. Ain't that a pretty thing? And we're so sad that today is their last Sunday. They'll be moving Friday back to San Antonio, and we'll continue to pray for them. They said, "You will always be our home church." And I love the fact they'll come and visit us from time to time. Who knows? I may go out to San Antonio and kill a big buck and have to go out there. Anyway, we love you guys. Thank you for being a part of our church. Wow, we're so glad to have you today. And we have some new friends visiting with us as well. And I'd remember the name, but I can't. I'm old, what can I tell you? Years ago, Teresa and I pastored in a little town called Americus, Georgia, close to Plains, where President Carter was from. And I was really a young guy. This has been 45 years ago almost, probably. And I said, you know, any good pastor, if he's going to be successful, needs to be a good piano player. I don't know where I got that from, but I thought that. So I found this older lady in town, and she's about my age now, but she's older than me. And I said, "I need to learn how to play the piano." She said, "Okay, I can do that." I said, "Okay." So she started teaching me. And we'd work, and we'd work, and we'd work, and we'd work. I said, "That's good." Then she said, "Now we put them together." And I learned that my hands were biblical. That is, my right hand didn't know what my left hand was doing. So I decided I didn't have enough rhythm to play the piano. So we thought about it, and she felt like, and I did too, it's best I didn't take any more piano lessons. I learned I didn't have any rhythm. The title of my message today is, "Do you have any rhythm?" Somebody told me after service this morning, they said, "I couldn't figure out how that scripture tied into your message till you were on into it." You'll figure it out. There is a thing that was done, a study that was done on the mechanisms of the brain that allow complicated things to happen, coordinates fashion, have kind of produced a kind of spectacular discoveries of how the brain works, and they clearly didn't study mine. But our brain uses different rhythms, they call it, in order to do complex operations like memorizing or remembering things. Scientists say that the rhythms in our brain are key to the learning process. A child learns, they learn rhythms. These brain waves work in them somehow that causes them to learn how they do things. And so we develop habits by these rhythms, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but they're associated with the rhythms of our brain. A habit is defined as a recurrent, often unconscious pattern of behavior that's acquired through repetition. You do one thing and you do it over and you do it over and you do it over. So a habit basically is a learned rhythm of life. We can exchange, they say, bad habits for good habits. Eating, working, sleeping, whatever. We can learn these new rhythms of life. Years ago, when I first became a Christian, I had lived a pretty rough life, and Pastor Nelm, Sister Nelm's his husband, and she pastored this church. Me and Teresa started coming. I became a Christian, and we started coming. And he came to me, and I was like a brand new Christian. And he gave me, I think, some of the best advice that I'd ever had all during my life. He just told me 3 simple things. He said, 1, prayer. He was a praying man. And he said, David, if you pray, you'll be good. I'm reminded of Psalms 55:17. Evening and morning and at noon I will pray, cry aloud, and he shall hear my voice. He said, 2, read your Bible. And I found that to be true. Acts 17 said, now the Bereans were more noble character than the Thessalonians, for they received the message with great eagerness and examined the scriptures. Watch this. Examined the scriptures every day to see what Paul said was true. They checked him out. And you ought to always check me out. Third thing was, he said, don't miss church. Stay in church. I learned what Hebrews said in the assembling of ourselves together. And let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. Now, if the writer of Hebrews said that so many years ago, surely the coming of the Lord must be closer now than it's ever been before. So he encourages us to do that. Some people said, why? You know, it's easy. I come to church. I like to hear what you have to say. I like to fellowship with you. I like to hug necks and talk to people because it's encouraging, especially if you've had a bad week or a bad day. So I believe that these habits, these rhythms are what keeps us going. We're about to move into a new year here in just a week or two. We'll be in a brand new year. And I've been talking to God about these rhythms. I've been talking to him about, I want to create good rhythms. You know, they say you can't teach an old dog new trick. I don't believe that. I believe that you're always learning, all the way up to the point you're not a part of this world anymore. You're learning. And these new rhythms, these new lines in the brain, so to speak, are moving us along. I believe God's presence, and that's what we're going to be talking about here in a moment, is manifest itself in the believer's life with both vital and visible signs or rhythms. In other words, I know, just like you know if you don't feel well. I said something to somebody this morning. They said, yeah, I hadn't felt good today. Not sick, just kind of off. I felt that way when I walked in this morning because I feel that way most mornings anyway. But you kind of know when you don't feel just right. You're not sure what it is. You can't put your finger on it. It's not something you can even explain to people. You're just not there. You're not where you need to be. I think that's true in dealing with the presence of God. You know when you're not just there. You know when you're not just right. When things are not just going on in your life the way that it needs to be. And these rhythms are signs. They're kind of like a doctor taking your vital signs or a nurse taking your vital signs. They read these signs. They know where you're at in your health, most of the time in your health things. So I believe these rhythms, if they're off, there's kind of a stirring down within us in our spirit that indicates that God is trying to do something or work something or be something in our life. And so these vital signs will a lot of times be long evident in our lives before the visible signs become apparent to others. I have over the years, I don't want to be ugly, but over the years I've watched, and you can see the signs, so to speak, long before they're evident to other people that maybe that person is not just kind of where they need to be, or they're not exactly what they where they need to be with God. And you kind of watch it, and you want to help them, but their rhythms are off. Well, I've learned that when they're off a lot of times before other people know it. Sometimes they're off before they even know it. Well, I've learned something about rhythms. You know, God has rhythm. I thought that was funny. God has rhythm. And he's not up there playing a guitar, I don't guess, or vibrating like Elvis. But everything has a rhythm. The universe has a rhythm. The planets have a rhythm. The solar system works in a kind of rhythmic way. The earth has a rhythm. It moves, it goes, it rotates. The seas have a rhythm. You ever gone down to the ocean and the beach comes in, the water comes in on the beach, and it goes certain distance and it moves back out. There's a rhythm to it. The four seasons have a rhythm. Winter and ugly weather like we're having right now. And then before long, spring will come, and then summer, and then fall. They all have rhythms. Our bodies have rhythm. Our heart has rhythm. Our lungs have rhythm. You know, when a person's heart gets off, boy, it gets out of rhythm. Sometimes they have been known to have to shock people just to get their hearts back in rhythm. Well, that's what Moses is dealing with. He has been on the mountainside for like 40 days and 40 nights. He's been up there with God. God has given him what we know as the 10 Commandments, not suggestions. And like the way you're shouting on that one. And so he comes down the mountain, and here the Israelites have gone crazy. Moses has been gone 40 days, 40 nights. Aaron is there with them. Aaron apparently don't know how to handle a crowd. So they're just like, well, he's not coming back, so we're just going to throw down and get us another God and have fun. I love reading that story for one verse, one little verse. There's a place in there where Aaron comes to him, and they said, we don't have a God. Moses is gone. We don't know what to do. What are we going to do? And Aaron gets afraid, and he says, okay, give me all your jewelry. And he takes all their gold, and he melts it down and makes them a calf. But here's what he says to Moses. That's not what he says to Moses. He says to Moses, I don't know what happened. They gave me their jewelry. I threw it in the fire, and out come a calf. Boy, you're talking about the blame game. He's got it, hasn't he? I'll tell you, worse than my wife. Anyway, so Moses it comes down, and he's all upset. He's like, what's going on? And he's so angry, throws the tablets down and breaks them. And he goes down and he talks with God, and God says, the bad part is, kill about 3,000 people. So he got the Levites together, and they wiped out a bunch of them, eradicating the sin out of there. And so Moses, at this point, goes back up into the mountain. So this is another 40 days and 40 nights. Man, I'm telling you, 80 days of fasting and praying has got to be something. So Moses kind of feels like he's kind of out of rhythm. He's at a place where he's distraught, he's a little bit upset, And he's kind of like talking to God, and he says, I can't go anywhere unless you go with me. I can't do anything. I can't be what I want to be unless you're going to be with me. And so God says to Moses, he says, I will be with you. I'll give you my presence. To which Moses responds and says, but I want you to show me your glory. You see, there was a place where the presence of God is going to get his rhythm kind of going again. But he wants more than that. Bruce, can you turn on some air? Just not cold air, just air. So here's what I decided. As we move into this new year, maybe your rhythm's off. Maybe you're here this morning and you're not just quite in check. So here's what I believe. I believe rhythms, if you get these rhythms, these habits, whatever, here's what it's going to do. Number one, it's going to bring a hunger for God at a deeper level. That's what Moses was saying. He was saying, it's okay if your presence is here. I'm glad to feel your presence, but I want to move to a deeper level than that. I want to go somewhere a little bit deeper, a little bit further with that. See, I'm sure at this point in his life, you got to think, he's got to be a little bit angry. He's got to be a little bit off. He's got to be a little bit out with the Israelites. And so this knowledge that God says to him, I'm going to be with you, had to bring an encouragement to him. But Moses responded with a deeper request. Please show me your glory. Yes. It's one thing to have his presence. It's another thing to move into a deeper, higher level with him. In other words, Moses was praying, I want to know you at a different level. I want to move into a different place with you. I don't know about you, but I kind of feel that way. I'm sort of telling the Lord the very same things. Lord, this year I want to move into a deeper level. I want to move up. I want to get my rhythms restored. I want to be where I need to be. Notice that Moses wasn't asking for more stuff. A lot of times in our prayer lives, that's all we really do. We just ask for a lot of stuff. Moses wasn't interested in stuff. He was interested in knowing God at a deeper, more personal level than he had before. Now, I'm going to talk to you a minute about what causes the problems there. But he was simply asking that he can know God more. There was within him this intense desire to experience more of God than he had ever known before. Maybe because he was a little bit distraught. Maybe because of all the actions that had taken place in those 40 days and 40 nights. And when he went back, all the trouble that he found there. I just know that when our spiritual life begins to grow stale, and sometimes it will, just like marriages, if you don't keep them up, kind of will grow stale. There is a sense of loss of God's glory and his presence. And we often, because of that, turn to substitutes to replace that which is lost. Those substitutes can even be, not necessarily bad stuff. It can be good stuff that just kind of substitutes for the real thing. But none of them indicate or bring about that kind of deeper, more consecrated level to get a hold of God. So one of the things I'm asking God for this year is, please, I want to move into a different level. I'm 72 years old, and I know at this point it's easy to get laid back and just kind of go along with the flow. But if I'm going to continue to pastor, and if I'm going to continue to preach, and I plan to for at least a while, I want to get to know him and grow in him to a new level. I need to work on the rhythms of my life. The Lord's response to Moses was unique. When he spoke to Moses, in essence, he answered him and said, you know, Moses, I can honor your request, but not completely. I can kind of show you a little bit of my glory, but you don't have the capacity to receive all that you're asking me. So he's like, I will give you all that you can stand. Sometimes I just like to have all he thinks I can stand. Then God placed Moses, Bible says, in the cleft of the rock. And he said, I'm going to pass by. And when I pass by, he allows Moses to get a glimpse of that glory that kind of remained as he passed on by. And it changed his life. And when God restores your awareness of his presence, it'll always accompany a hunger to know him at a deeper level than ever before. When God's presence really comes into your life, really begins to operate, and you get the rhythms of that presence, it will cause you to want even more of what he is. Second thing I've noticed is that rhythm will bring a definite sense of progress in your walk with God. In other words, it'll raise you to a different level. It's easy for us to just kind of get satisfied with where we're at. It's real easy just to grow in a satisfaction. I'll go to church, I'll tithe, I'll say hey to the preacher, I'll go on about my business. But most of the time, when you move into the process of his presence, it will bring about a new progress in your walk. You'll remember that what transpires in the chapters before, I went back and just reread through that. And you read of all this stuff that's going on, and this it's kind of an interruption to some degree in the process of God's communication with Moses on Mount Sinai. And what happens down here is sort of like apathy. And so apathy always hinders progress. And your spiritual growth has been impeded. If you're going along, Brother Nams told me, he said, David, if you'll always do those three things, you'll stay where you need to be. And I found out that when any one of those lack, either prayer life or prayer or Bible reading or church attendance, when that stops or is hindered by apathy or whatever, it always affects what I have with God and where I'm at with God. So God has to be allowed to deal with that break in the rhythm of your life before growth can accelerate. In other words, he has to break up that apathy. Every time I say that word, I think of Andy Griffith and Barney Fife, and Barney's reading that word, and he calls it apathy. Apathy is that little small thing that just sort of settles into our life and causes us to kind of draw back from the aggressive nature that we need to have with God. So if you look at chapter 34 and you read the first 4 verses, the Lord speaks to Moses and he's like, look, cut yourself new tablets of stone, get ready, come back up here. We're going to talk again. Be ready in the morning. Come up in the morning to Mount Sinai. Present yourself to me, and we're going to work on that end of it. So what God is doing, he's breaking the apathy, the thing that's just causing us to go, oh, well, it's no point, no use. I can't do any better. Things are not working my way. Things are bad in my life. It's easy to let that keep you from being what God wants you to be. So God and Moses, at this point, are working together again. Spiritual progress seems to be once again restored on the top of that mountain. And rhythms were being restored back together. So I've determined that in this new year to come, that's what I want to do. I want to restore those rhythms. I want to get those habits, those good rhythms, those good habits of being with God, praying, reading my scriptures, coming to church. Oh, I'm going to come to church because y'all fire me if I don't. But coming to church, and so that's what we need. Now, the third thing that I realized in this was that rhythms will reveal answered prayer. A lot of times we wonder, well, God's not answering my prayer. I don't know why I pray and nothing seems to happen. Moses' prayer had been very simple. He wasn't asking God for stuff. He was asking for more of God. It was twofold. One, he says, restore your presence. In other words, come back into my heart and life. Get me to a place that I need to be. But then his second was, show me your glory. So he is indicating that there is a place of his presence, but there's a place where you enter into that kind of holy of holies, that inner sanctum, that place that it takes it beyond his presence and he moves you into that kind of realm where you really touch God. You've been there. You know what that means. So look how God responded. The Lord descended in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Lord. The Lord passed by before him and proclaimed, the Lord, the Lord. That's the first time I've ever seen that scripture where it's used twice like that. The Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding, steadfast love and faithfulness. Keep steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquities and transgressions and sin. In other words, God is saying, when you move into my presence, there's going to be answered prayer. I'm going to bring myself closer to you. We're going to see where you need stuff in your life taken out, replaced, rhythms restored. It's a transparent truth that you cannot have answered prayer unless you pray. Jack Nicklaus years ago made the statement, 100% of the putts that don't get to the hole won't go in. And you're going, well, that's what God is saying. I can't answer prayer if you don't pray. So we need prayer. And so when the rhythms has been restored, you'll be consumed, I believe, with an intense inward desire to communicate with God in prayer. How do I do that? Well, David talked about praying morning, noon, and night. Daniel prayed morning, noon, and night, turned himself to the Lord. But I believe it's more than kneel time. I believe that there'll be a daily sense of his presence so overwhelming that almost a moment by moment communion with him is inevitable. I remember when I first became a Christian, I'd been a bad person. Drug addict, problems. I was not a good husband till we got saved. Now I'm the best. No. But I remember when I got saved, I worked at a Starling Dairies milk company, and I ran an early morning home delivery, darker parts of Savannah. Even back then, 50 years ago, it was kind of bad. But I remember being in that old milk truck early in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I would be communing with God. Man, I'd be praying. I'd be talking to the Lord like he was riding in the milk truck with me. We'd be just talking, and I'd be listening. I'd be singing. I didn't even know the words to Amazing Grace. I just made them up as I went. But I was so involved. I wanted to be so close to him that I wanted almost every waking moment that I had, I wanted to be talking with him. Those were the best days, church. You see, those, not just the kneel, what I call the kneel time, but those times during the day when I'm just riding in my truck or I'm going to visit a hospital or going somewhere, to be talking with God, just communicating, saying stuff to him. Lord, I need this, or I want to be close to you, or I want you to speak to my heart. And that's my desire. Even after all these years, that desire to pray and communicate with God is a part of the rhythm that I want to have in my life. Next, I believe rhythm will cause a fresh awareness and excitement about God and his directions for your life. I found in serving God all of these years that it's not hard to kind of fall into a boredom where maybe your prayer life is not as good as it was, or you're not as close to God as you once were, and you kind of get, I don't want to say bored, but you just lethargic in some way. How many of you would love to have the excitement that you had when you were first a Christian? You remember that? Oh my God, I went to church 21 straight days. I went to church. We had a revival, and then Brother Nams went to preach another revival, and I followed him that week, and then we had something else. I went to church every time the doors were open. I was there. I had such an excitement that God had saved a wretched soul like me. I was so excited, and I wonder sometimes, why do we think that has to go away? Why do we think that that can't be a natural part of our life, that we're excited to be with God? We're excited that we get to commune with Him. We're excited that we get to be a Christian. We had a couple that attended our church, one of our churches. They had been married, I guess, 25 or 30 years. And old Bob would walk in with his little bride. He'd be holding her hand. He would walk in. He would, when they got there, he'd open the door for her at her car and help her out like she's so fragile she's going to break. He'd sit down, had his arm around her. I said, Bob, you killing the rest of us. You know that. You're making us look really bad. But you would have thought they were newlyweds. You would have thought they just got married. But that fire and excitement of that marriage, I don't know. They lived to be well up in age. I don't know that it ever diminished. Every time you saw him, he was like that. Every time they went out, every time they were together. And I thought to myself, that's what God wants with us. He wants that kind of relationship that never diminishes. It never goes away. It never lacks rhythm. Every day we're the same with God. And that's the way it ought to be. In fact, there's a certain degree of excitement in your heart. Look at if you read in Exodus 34:10, it says, "For it is an awesome thing that I will do with you." That's what God told Moses. And I'm telling you, maybe you are lacking a little luster in your relationship. Maybe as we grow towards the end of the year, you're like, I'm just not what I used to be, or things are not just like they ought to be. Then pray and ask God to restore the excitement in your life again, so that He'll display His glory. That's what Moses was saying. I don't want to know just your presence. I want to take this thing a step further. I want you to show me your glory. In other words, let's put the excitement back in our walk. Rhythms will bring your spiritual desires in line with your sensual demands. Watch this. Moses' time with God was on Sinai was nothing less or short of a miracle. In Exodus 34:28 it says, "So he was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. He neither ate bread nor drank water, and he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant of the 10 Commandments." Something was happening there. Now you say, what does that mean in lieu of what you just said? Notice that it said, he neither ate nor drank. The sensual desires that we normally have were overtaken by the spiritual move of God in his life. He was more interested in being with God, communing with God, and caring with God than he had for all the other things in life. I've noticed that when things come into my life that are more exciting than him, they're usually not good for me. I'm not telling you they're wrong. I'm just telling you they're not as good for you if they replace the excitement that you have with God. It's amazing to realize that 40 days, now this is actually 80 days later, that he is proceeded with this emotional, physical, taxing time, that he is more interested in God and what God is doing than anything else. So during those days, the Lord must have provided him with some supernatural kind of energy. And what's more impressive is that Moses' spiritual desire seemed to take precedence over his sensual demands. Now, what I'm saying to you is the closer you get with God and the more he is involved in your life, the less things outside of it appeal to you. One of the most critical of the rhythms of God's presence in me is that the spiritual issues of your life will become greater concern. I can look at my life and go, hey, I need to step it up. I need to come back to the plate. I need to put it in gear again instead of letting it become just a sense of apathy. And I think this, of course, flies in the face of our contemporary culture because they want you to have more things and they want you to do more stuff rather than getting closer to God. Verse 29 in chapter 34. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tables of testimony in his hand, as he came down from the mountain, Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone because he had been talking with God. Boy, I don't know that I've ever experienced that. But boy, wouldn't that be something? That you've been so close to God, the rhythms of your life have been so powerful, they have impacted you to a place that you resonate with his glory. Now, I don't know that I've ever seen anybody, but I've seen people that you know they had been with God. When you got around them, you just sensed that there was something there. That takes time in being with God. It takes time in spending time with God. So I'm kind of lining up, I don't want to say New Year's resolutions, but I'm sort of lining up goals for 26. I want to be closer to God. I don't want to just know his presence, I want to see his glory. I want to get so involved and so connected with him that he directs my path. I want to be so connected with him that he changes the countenance, that he changes my attitude, that he changes my thoughts, that he changes everything about me. Because that's what Moses did. And I believe those rhythms, if the devil can get you out of those rhythms, he can take you out of closeness with God. It's possible today that your rhythms are off. I hesitated on this sermon. I thought, Lord, this is kind of a weird sermon. But your rhythms are off timing. Shakespeare once wrote, "There is a tide in the affairs of men, which taken at the flood leads on to fortune, omitted all the voyage of their life is abound in shallows and misery." In other words, if you get off rhythm, you're not going to ever get out of your life what you want. If you're in rhythm, your marriage is going to be better. I believe your job's going to be better. I believe your prayers are going to be answered. I believe your life is going to be different. The Latins had a phrase that expressed the same kind of idea. Carpe diem quam menem credu postero. You understood that, did you? It says, seize the day, put no trust in tomorrow. In other words, get what you need with God today. Don't think about it in terms of, I'll do it next week, next year, next month. I need to get from God what I can get from God right now, because I want my life to be my best life. We stand here today at the eve of a new year, the few weeks. And this year will be filled with opportunities and challenges for each one of us. And the thing is, a question that confronts us is that whether or not we will seize the opportunity to really do something different in our life. Restore the rhythms. Get your rhythm back in going. James says the same thing. Take no thought of tomorrow. In other words, whatever you're going to do, get it done today. And I think that's where we need to be. A few weeks ago, during Thanksgiving, Teresa and I went down to Orlando to see my sister. She's 83 years old. I can't see her as 83. I'm the baby, she's the oldest, and I still see her like she's 25. She's still pretty to me, and I still love her. We went down, she was in the hospital and had been in there a few days, and we went down. In fact, we went over to the hospital to get her out. So we were waiting on them to come, and I said, so what are you having? What's going on? She said, I'm so dizzy. I said, I wobble around. I get nauseated when I get up. I just can't seem to stand. I said, well, are you better? She said, yeah, I'm a little better. I said, what did they do? She said, they reset the crystals. I heard about crystals. I'm like trading mine in on something good, a muscle car or something. She said I said, what did they do? She said they put my head kind of off the side of the bed, and they moved my head around until those crystals fell back into the place that they need to be. I'd heard about that, but that's the strangest thing I've ever heard of. But people who are dizzy say that it works. That all of a sudden, when those crystals are back in gear and right where they need to be, things change. Well, I wonder sometimes if God doesn't need to reset the crystals in some of our heads. Kind of get us back in gear. I guess what I'm saying to you is don't waste another year. Decide today that what you're going to do is you want to reset those rhythms. You want to get those good habits. You want to get those things that are right. Reset in your life to where you can move into a greater dimension with God. And that's what I'm doing, and I hope maybe that's a challenge to you today to do the same thing. Let's pray. Father, thank you for helping us and reminding us of how much we need you in our lives and how easy it is to let things kind of stand in the way. Apathy come and stand in the way. Lord, I want you to reset in me those rhythms. Recognize. I need to recognize those things that maybe aren't what they need to be. They're distracted to me. And I want to move towards you. So I'm asking you to set rhythms back in store in my life. Help me develop good habits. Reject bad. To look where I can move in closer, not just to have your presence, to know you're there, but move into a deeper dimension with you, to know and see your glory. So I'm asking that for this wonderful congregation today. Every one of us, Lord, probably fit this. We've let different things keep us from really coming after you. Yet every person that I see in the Bible that was so successful were people that were aggressive and they're reaching you. Aggressive to know you. So Lord, help us today. Help each one of us to be that way. As your heads are bowed and eyes are closed, I just want to pray for you. If you're here today and maybe, I don't know, maybe apathy set in, maybe you're just not where you once were. Maybe your excitement has waned and you just know it's there, but you've been struggling to get it back. I'm not condemning you by any means because we're all at that place at some point in time in our life. So today's a good day to start, not tomorrow. Today is a good day to start. So if you just slip your hand up, I'm not going to ask you to stand or anything. I just want to pray for you. Thank you. Thank you. Other hands are going up. God bless your heart. You know, I kind of want to raise mine up too. Just say, Lord, I want to move into that new place with you. I want to have a real sense of your presence. So I'm going to pray for you this morning. Lord, you saw those hands that have gone up. You recognize that all of us sometimes fall into those places where we're a little off rhythm. Not quite what we were. We're not backslid. We're not gone. We're still close enough that we sense when you're around, but we haven't been aggressive enough to say, show me your glory. Take me to a different level with you. So for all of them who raise their hands, for all of us that are in here today, oh Lord, take us to a new level. Take us to a new place of rhythm so we can be with you. Father, I thank you for that today. Bless us during these days. Lord, walk with us. It's a tough time, I tell you. All the holidays. But Lord, let us don't forget the real reason for the season, I pray. In Jesus' name. Would you stand with me? And Monroe's going to lead you in this